2. Mathematical logic. Previously, we tried to approach dialectics from the point of view of fuzzy logic. Now, we will try to approach dialectics from the point of view of mathematical logic. One of the main exponents of mathematical logic in 20th century, Bertrand Russell, writes, "The aims of this school are less spectacular than that of other philosophies." We may inquire what these aims are. From my personal experience as a student of philosophy at Columbia University in the city of New York, the aims of mathematical logic and analytical philosophy in general, of which math logic is a major part, is fooling naive college students. One historical example of this is the fate of Ludwig Wittgenstein in his first approach to Bertrand Russell as an aspiring student of philosophy at Cambridge. Wittgenstein has been turned by the eminent philosopher from Cambridge to problems of language instead of turning to really important problems of our age. In my personal experience, I have seen people that, like Wittgenstein, very bright, selfless students who have been impressed by the difficulties of mathematical logic and authority of eminent college professors, and hence turned to the studies of Cantor and Frege. In general, modern college professors act as fake aims for incoming nuclear missiles, which are the young college students. They entangle the students in fake kinds of problems, and hence disarm their revolutionary zeal. This is what philosophy college professors are paid for. A. We start our examination of mathematical logic with John Stuart Mill, who lived from 1806 to 1873. 1. I view logic as a resume of methods of advancing from known truths to the unknown. As the known truths and methods of advancing into the unknown are different for every epoch, logic must advance with each epoch. 2. Mill best exhibits the methods of his epoch in Autobiography, a work written late in his life. His earlier work, A System of Logic, published in 1843, is in part a repetition of medieval methods of learning, in part a repetition of what Francis Bacon has already said clearly and with force in his Organon. 3. The method which Mill describes in his Logic is a method which we call today a method of a controlled experiment, as for example, when a group of sick patients is given a drug and another group of sick patients is given a placebo, and then effects of the drug and placebo on the two groups are contrasted, one against another. 4. Mill describes 5 variations of this method, the principal aim of which is to establish a cause of things, or find an effect. 5. First, as Mill describes it, quote, if two or more instances of the phenomenon under investigation have only one circumstance in common, the circumstance in which alone all these instances agree is the cause or effect of the given phenomenon. Wikipedia calls this the method of agreement and represents it as in the diagram given. 6. Second method of Mill. Quote, if an instance in which the phenomenon under investigation occurs and an instance in which it does not occur have every circumstance save one in common, that one occurring only in the former, the circumstance in which alone the two instances differ is the effect or cause or an indispensable part of the cause of the phenomenon. Wikipedia calls it the method of difference. It can be represented as in the diagram. 7. The third method of Mill. Quote, if two or more instances in which the phenomenon occurs have only one circumstance in common, while two or more instances in which it does not occur have nothing in common save the absence of that circumstance, the circumstance in which alone the two sets of instances differ is the effect or cause or a necessary part of the cause of the phenomenon. Wikipedia calls it a method of agreement and difference, and represents it as in the diagram. 8. Fourth method of Mill. Quote, subduct from any phenomenon such part as is known by previous inductions to be the effect of certain antecedents, and the residue of the phenomenon is the effect of the remaining antecedents. Wikipedia calls it a method of residue. Symbolically, it can be represented thus: A, B, C occur together with small x, y, z. See the diagram. 9. The fifth method of Mill. Quote, whatever phenomenon varies in any manner whenever another phenomenon varies in some particular manner is either a cause or an effect of that phenomenon, or is connected with it through some fact of causation. Wikipedia calls this the method of concomitant variation. It can be represented as in the diagram. 10. In general, we see a method of careful analysis used to trace a connection between causes and effects of things. The methodology of J.S. Mill is no dead letter, but has been used, for example, by a sociologist from Harvard, Theda Skocpol, in her book States and Social Revolutions, to try to trace causes of social revolutions. A problem in application of Mill's methodology by capitalist sociologists is that a phenomenon is seen in empirical fashion as a constant, non-moving thing, while in reality everything is in a state of development, and especially such dynamic phenomena as revolutions. For example, in Wikipedia we read, quote, consider two structurally different countries. Country A is a former colony, has a center-left government, and has a federal system with two levels of government. Country B has never been a colony, has a center-left government, and is a unitary state. One factor that both countries have in common, the dependent variable in this case, is that they have a system of a universal health care. Comparing the factors known about the countries above, a comparative political scientist would conclude that the government sitting on the center left of the spectrum would be the independent variable which causes a system of universal health care, while it is the only one of the factors examined which holds constant between the two countries, and the theoretical backing for that relationship is sound. Social democratic center-left parties often include universal health care. End of quote. Not true. We can look at the modern history of the United States and Western Europe and find a center-left government without a universal health care. For example, the United States under John F. Kennedy administration. And we can find a center-right government with a universal health care, for example, Great Britain under Margaret Thatcher. Hence, there is no necessary connection between the leanings of the government and the social system of a state. As extreme cases of the latter, we see some free and universal health care being preserved in states undergoing capitalist restoration after 1991 in Eastern Europe. States undergoing capitalist restoration have extremely reactionary types of government. That is not even center-right, but right and even Nazi type of government. 12. Before we start an investigation, we need to clearly define the object of our investigation. This is what Mill says in his Logic, and he explains how to do it. Quote, to define is to select from among all the properties of a thing those which shall be understood to be designated and declared by its name. Seems like a reasonable proposal. Give a first ad hoc definition of the process which shall be investigated. The whole process of investigation can be seen as an elaboration of this definition. In the end of investigation, as we summarize the results of the investigation, we shall be providing a new, in-depth definition of the process. Thus, we will have completed a spiral of knowledge of development. 13. One problem with methodology of J.S. Mill, and hence Thaddeus Catchpole, is that one and the same process can be both a cause and an effect. For example, a revolution in productive forces is both a cause of social political revolutions and a consequence of the latter. 14. A second problem with the method of Mill and hence Catchpole is that both are concerned with understanding the causes of events or effects of causes. They don't view events as typical developments which display typical stages of development. For example, all revolutions have a similar dialectic, with the English Revolution being more similar to the French Revolution, as they are both bourgeois revolutions, and the Russian Revolution being more similar to the Chinese Revolution, as they are both early prototypes of socialist revolutions. The task for an explorer is to investigate what were the similar and different stages in these events. For example, one early attempt to investigate typical stages of a revolution was a 1994-95 article by Alexander Tarasov called National Revolutionary Process: Internal Laws and Stages. For example, in Russian, see at Skepsis. I provide a link. He draws a comparison between the Russian Revolution and the French Revolution on the way up towards greater democracy and freedom, and on the way down towards development of Napoleonic Stalinist dictatorship. Another early attempt at understanding typical stages of a social revolution is a 1998-99 essay by Gennady Kozak called Towards Understanding the Logic of Revolutions, using the English Revolution as an example. See the link provided. An attempt is made to look at the typical stages of a revolution, with constant references to the French, Russian, and scientific revolutions, as a way to highlight the essence of the English Revolution. Another interesting technique of this work is an attempt to look at the events from different aspects of social life, that of religion, poetry, economic development, and more. 15. Let's observe that a similar approach is adopted by modern astrophysics when the life cycle of a star is discussed. To do that, stars are observed at different stages of their development, and hence a typical life cycle of a star is constructed. Such method of understanding development I propose to call comparative dialectics, as many examples of a similar phenomena are compared and their typical stages of development are named. 16. If dialectics is a summary of methods of knowledge, as we have said in our remarks on Lenin, then we should briefly mention educational ideas of J.S. Mill. There are three basic forms of studying. 1. Formal classes, as in schools and universities. 2. Informal meetings, as for example, when eminent friends of Mill's father would come to his house and discuss their ideas. 3. There is independent studying on one's own. All three methods supplement each other. When studying on one's own, one should attend most interesting lectures at universities, go to exhibitions, concerts, etc. 17. When developing someone, I mean educating some child, we should not provide the answers, but lead them in the directions of the answers. A plan of studies is needed. Such plan varies with age and with needs of the student. 18. The education of Mill was theoretical, and hence in his young years he suffered depression. To relieve himself, he turned to poetry. In emotion, he found a relief from constant thinking. However, we believe that education should be both physical, in the sense of developing one's body, physical culture, and intellectual, theoretical and practical, in the sense of learning to work with one's hands. 19. A child should learn at least one foreign language, better two or more. In order to learn languages, traveling is a big plus. One learns thinking by writing. This is a serious skill that one should not want to miss. I mean, writing to think more clearly. The more one advances in life, the more writing of one's own thinking replaces what others have written or thought. 20. A goal in life one can obtain from a study of history and philosophy. This becomes possible from around the age of 15. Appreciation of wild nature develops in one a sense of beauty, a beauty of nature. For example, Mill was deeply impressed by the mountains of France. For more detail, read my essay on John Stuart Mill.